we should start our session, and I will begin with more of a recap of what you have managed to cover so far. And our journey, I think we are almost midway, and by now you should be having an idea of what we're doing here. So if somebody asks you about quantitative analysis class, at least you can be able to tell a thing or two. So what have we covered so far? So up to today, I believe you should be comfortable in as far as data entry is concerned. That means if you're given a survey, you can be able to roll out that exercise. And in as far as a survey is concerned, things to do with data entry, you should be comfortable. And also how to identify the different types of questions. What I mean here is not just all about doing data entry. You should also understand how that question was framed or structured, and also what is the goal behind why you have a certain question in a questionnaire. Because like I mentioned, every question in a questionnaire, it has a purpose that is supposed to achieve. So that is the first instance. We have also covered data management, and I introduced a few concepts here and there. I know it's not exhaustive because it depends with, again, the type of data that you're handling. So in as far as this data set called employee data is concerned, we have played around with a couple of things here and there, things like how to do recording, how to do select of cases, how to split your file. I think we also manage how to do compute. And the idea here is we're just exploring your data. You're trying to see, is there an issue that needs to be resolved, or what type of insights can you be able to get in as far as exploratory data analysis is concerned. The last time we had a class, I think I had introduced something called pivot table, and with pivot table, we were able to come up with a summary report, and that is where I want to pick my session today. So we said if you're given some variable and you don't know exactly what type of insight are you looking forward to, we said pivot table can come in handy. And with pivot table, you're just going to drag and drop. As long as you find some sort of insight, then you can go further and investigate. Let me repeat that. Pivot table is just dragging and drop. Once you identify some sort of pattern in your data set, then you can go further and investigate. And I hope that is what we're going to do today. So we said, how do you access, or how do you perform, or how do you work with pivot table? You go to analyze. We say there's an option of tables, and if you custom table, then you will be able to drag and drop. I don't know if you guys are also doing as I do, or you just watch and then you do it later. It's kind of confusing, but I hope we're in the same page up to where we have arrived today. Because today I want to now start giving you guys assignment. That is the only way that I will know if we're in the same page or I'm just the entertainer. Like I said, I'm not here to entertain anyone. It's you to now get the knowledge. And now this knowledge that I'm teaching you, you can be able to replicate in any other data sets that you're going to encounter. And things are real out there. When you get maybe a different data set, then that is when now you'll be challenged, so that you know, are you really an expert in as far as SPSS is concerned or not? So that was just by the way. So if you have not been practicing, then I think you'll be doing a disservice on yourself. So I want to identify some sort of pattern in data set, and the variable that I'm interested in is job cut. So if I take job cut, which is basically employment category, to the column section, no, I think let's have job cut on the row section. So I'll take employment category. I'll have it on the row section. And then I'll have gender on the column section. And then I can also have minority classification also on the column section. And now let me capture employment category on the row section. That looks like a funny result, but let's see what you're going to get. Yes, I think this is funny. This is not what I was hoping for. Let's do it again. So I'll take employment categories on the row section, and then gender on the column area, and then minority classification, I will also have it on the column section. And if I say OK, then yes, this is the results I was intending to get. So you can tell a lot in these datasets. So I don't want to spend a lot of time maybe asking you guys to identify some pattern, but I'm sure if you concentrate and look at the numbers, they'll be telling you something. One of the themes that I've managed to identify here is on the issue of gender. As you can see, we have more male managers compared to female. So if you add male managers, you can see that we have 70 of the males who are not from the minority group. And also we have 4 of them who are from the minority. So if you do your addition, that is 74 male managers compared to only 10 female managers. So if you were to concentrate more on the thematic area of gender balance, then you realize there's an issue there that might trigger someone to go further and do some sort of discussion or go and find out, is there an issue or it's just numbers communicating? So this is where now I'll pick in as far as introducing inferential analysis. And I mentioned that we have 2 types of analysis. We have descriptive analysis, then we have inferential analysis. With inferential analysis, this is where you want to go further and say, is there a relationship between these variables that you're working with? So for instance, and I can borrow, yes, Dalmas.
Just a reminder on the recordings because we'll be following this keenly even after we are done with the class through the replay.
I think we are recording. Though I've been facing challenges, I think the last 2 videos I recorded without, the voice was not captured, but I think I've already sorted out. So today you'll be able to get the clip. But nonetheless, I'm going to have this class over and over. So in case there's something that will not be captured, you have a lifetime access to my classes. And that's the beauty of being here with me. So I was explaining on the results output and what we are getting, and you have just identified that more males are getting managerial position compared to female. That is not me, but those are what the numbers are saying. So what do you do with that information? So that is what we referred as problem statement. And I said I'm going to borrow a lot from the academic research work, because now that is where all of us are supposed to start. And before you even graduate, I'm sure all of you did some sort of project in campus. And I believe your professor told you that the best place for you to start a project is by identifying a problem. There should be an issue that triggers you to now say, I'm going out there and do what you call fact-finding mission. Okay, so in this case, what is the problem? The problem is we're having more males getting managerial position compared to female. Now, is that the case? We don't know. Why we don't know? Because we don't have evidence. So just because you're saying 74 male managers and only 10 female managers, is not a reason enough for you to start making noise, because somebody will ask you, do you have evidence to support your claim? And that is actually what research is all about. You go out there, collect data, and then what does that data tell you? That is now what you call data analysis. And then from there, you can say, I've done my analysis and my finding says this one. And then you conclude. So I'm just emphasizing on the structure of a research, because research is the only precise way of communication. And like I said, the journey starts with identifying a problem. So the problem here is clear. We are having more male managers compared to female. So if you are doing your project, I would encourage you to have like around 3 paragraphs explaining further what is this issue that you have identified. So in this case, you can have 3 paragraphs just to tell you on the relationship between managerial position and gender aspect. So after you have identified your problem, then the question is, what do you want to achieve? And that is where we go to the objective side of now your research. And objective has to be very precise. Now, I'm going to formulate some sort of objective so that it will guide us on the analysis that you're going to do. So in this case, I might decide to come up with my first objective, which I will say, I want to investigate if there is a relationship between employment category and gender. That can be one of my objective in this case. So from your objective, now that is what is going to guide you, even the type of data that you're going to collect. Remember, okay, there are 2 different school of thoughts, and there are those proponents like me who I always advocate that you should find out about your data before you even come up with your objective, which I have reasons for that. But also, in as far as working smoothly, uh, the procedure is always you identify your problem statement, you come to your objective, like what I've just stated. Is there a relationship between gender and the different employment category? And then now that objective will enable you to come up with a research question. And in this case, the question will be, what is the relationship between gender and employment category? Now, that is what our data is supposed to answer. If you're not going the route of having a research question, then you can formulate hypothesis. So it's always your choice. You either decide to use the research question, which is basically you convert your objective to become a question. I think that's the most common route that most people take. If you're not going that road, then you can come up with an hypothesis. And of course, we will discuss later about hypothesis and what have you. After research question, because of the approach I want to take, now you go to what do you call it, justification of your study. And with justification, again, this is where you will discuss things to do with the utility. Who is going to benefit from this study that you're doing? Is it government agencies? Is it non-governmental? Is it the academia? And so forth. So you should also be clear, or you should understand who are some of the beneficiary of your work. And I think that is more of an overview of what chapter 1 in a research work is all about. Okay, so of course there's things to do with the maybe the background of your study. So those are just not really the core thing. But if I'm to look at your project, assuming I'm your supervisor, then those things that I've just mentioned has to really come out clean. Now, I'm still focusing with academia. So after you have identified those things that I've mentioned, then that is when I'll give you permission to go to chapter 2, which is the literature review. And in literature review, we normally segment it into 2. So I would be expecting you to discuss about the theoretical review and also empirical review. Now, what is the difference between the 2? When you talk about theoretical review, this is where you sit down and identify theories that has been fronted in as far as the subject matter are concerned. So what I mean here is, are there theories that are talking about gender? Of course, we even have people who are doing gender studies. So you go and look at what are those theories saying. You can also look at gender theory that are in line with employment. I think this is where you can quote guys like Adam Smith. We also have, I think, Karl Marx. Those are some of the people who have done a lot of study in that area. But I'm just giving a by the way or an overview of what is expected of you. So at undergraduate level, you can have around three, not really three, around two theory, you're good to go. But as you now advance, maybe your masters, you will need to see around 3 to 4 theories, and then PhD is where now you can go deeper. But I'm sure you're getting the idea. At least tell us what are some of the theories that have been fronted that are in line with your topic. Now, apart from theoretical review, I've just mentioned about empirical review. I hope we're together. So, with empirical review, I always say this is where you invite other scholars. Who are other people who have done some study in line with your topic, and you quote them. So maybe there's somebody else in at a global level that they have done a study that is more relatable with your work. Now you also tell us what were they doing and also what were their findings. And you can always break it down from global, regional, and then now you concentrate with your country. Okay. I will be, maybe if time allows, or maybe I will be able to share with you a sample paper. But I'm sure most of these things that I talk about is not totally new. So after you are done with literature review, now we go to the third chapter, which is research methodology, and that is where now where research now starts. Because with the research methodology, this is where now you have to communicate on the procedure that you will take in as far as your research is concerned. One of the first thing you need to discuss there is your research design. What type of research design are you doing? Are you adopting descriptive? Are you doing a cross-sectional? Are you doing, so of course when you talk about cross-sectional, this is where you're doing mixed method. That means you're combining both qualitative and quantitative approaches. Uh, for descriptive, and why descriptive research design is a big deal, is the duplication process out of it. What do I mean here? Assuming you're doing a study at an informal settlement, let's say Kibra, if you opt for a descriptive research design, then it means the findings one informal settlement can be implemented in another informal settlement. It can even be Soweto or uh, Mukuru Kwanjenga. And so I'm sure you're getting the point. And it's not just on informal settlement. So descriptive analysis is one of the most popular approaches, especially on operational research, because now the findings can be implemented also in a different setting. Now, of course, I talked about research design. After research design, you need to talk about your population. Who are your target population? Who are the participants or the audience, people that are supposed to be involved in your research? And now, after you have identified your target population, now you can go further and say, of course, are you doing a survey or you're doing a census? If you're doing a census, then it means the entire population becomes part of your research, which is a very expensive process and also time consuming. And that is what now will trigger you uh, to now come up with a sample. Okay. Whereby now you'll say, I don't want to involve everyone who is part of my target population, but can I get a representation? The question will be, how will you arrive to that representation? And if that representation that you will select, does it reflect the entire population? And here you need to now understand things like sampling methods. Are you doing a random sampling, uh, or you're doing purposive sampling? So I think in other books we talk about uh, probability and what's the name for this one? But are you getting the point? Random, that means you just pick randomly individuals to be part of your sample. And then purposive, this is where you choose or someone is selected to be part of your sample based on the information that they will be able to give you. And in as far as, of course, now I'm just giving an overview. I know I'm all over the place, but now if you are clear about your sampling method, then that will also inform you about the tool, which now I'm going to the next thing, which are your research instruments. Are you using a questionnaire? Are you using a key informant interview guide? Are you doing focus group discussion? You can also do observation, whereby you as a researcher, you can be walking around there and you just observe the phenomena that are happening and then you record that. So in most instances, depending with your sampling method, questionnaires always go in handy with random sampling, because now you say, as long as you fit to be part of your population, you can just be randomly given a questionnaire. But for purposive sampling, this is where now you can use a key informant interview guide. I will say, I will conduct an interview with a specific person because of the information that they will be able to give you. Okay. So I don't want to dwell a lot on that, but now let me come back to, because again, I'm not teaching research. If I was teaching you research, then maybe we'll go that approach. But now I'm here to teach you on how to do analysis. So in this case, we have already identified a theme, or we have an objective, which is said we are trying to look at the relationship between employment category and the gender of the respondent. So this is automatically an example of inferential analysis. So what are the steps that you need to follow in analyzing or conducting any inferential analysis? Step number one, you need to talk about the test statistics. What type of test are you going to do in as far as your variables are concerned? The same way in descriptive analysis, we said what? If your variable is categorical, then the descriptive analysis that you did there was coming up with a frequency table. If your variable was continuous, we said the test statistic that you will do there was coming up with measures of central tendency. And there's a reason behind that choice. If you do otherwise, then the findings you will get is something that maybe you might not be able even to explain or to defend. The same case applies also in the inferential analysis, whereby I said you will have to communicate about your test statistics. What test are you going to do? Now you look at your variable. So we will be doing, or we'll be talking about tests like chi-square test of association. We'll see why and when to do chi-square. We'll also do correlation analysis. We will look at independent sample t-tests. So we have a lot of t-tests, but I think I will focus more with independent. We'll also further go into now running regression, whereby we now say, apart from just checking relationship, can you be able to predict or to do some sort of estimation? Whereby you say, if I'm given 1, 2, and 3, I can be able to tell about the future. Okay. So the same way with even right now, I think there was that conversation about weather, and there were some guys who are coming and say, hey, tomorrow we are going to have rain. But now the question is, how do they arrive to them telling you that tomorrow is going to rain? Okay, that is now regression. Okay, so we'll also see uh, when do you do regression and what can you achieve with regression analysis. So step number 2 in conducting inferential analysis, after you have identified your test statistic, then you need to formulate your hypothesis. And hypothesis is just an assumption or some sort of claim. For instance, in this case, we just have an assumption. We assume that there must or there may be a relationship between employment category and gender aspect. Though that is an assumption. Why is it an assumption? Until we come up with some sort of proof, we cannot start screaming here and there. So with hypothesis, like I said, is just an assumption or a claim. And now you'll have to formulate two of them. We have what we call the null hypothesis, and then we also have the alternative hypothesis. Null hypothesis, basically, this is where you'll be sticking by the status quo. What is currently there? Like at the moment, we don't know if there's a relation between a manager and the employment category. So my null hypothesis will be there is no relationship between employment category and uh, gender being passive there. Like I stick by the status quo. I hope that should make sense. So what I'm also trying to communicate here is null hypothesis will always be a negative statement unless you've been given. So when I'll be teaching you guys Stata, there are some areas that now they are universally provided hypothesis. Like for instance, if you're trying to check for normality of your data, you realize there was a guy called Komolgorov who fronted hypothesis for now measuring normality. So in that case, you are not going to formulate your own hypothesis, but instead you will follow that. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that null hypothesis will always be a negative statement unless it has been provided for you. The alternative hypothesis in this case now will be there is a relationship between gender and employment category. And that is now the idea that you want to front. And in an event that you meet the threshold, then you can even adopt now this new uh, school of thought that you're coming and say, hey, based on this data set, I've established that there is a relationship between gender and employment category. So those are step number 2. So step number 1, don't forget to say this, you need to talk about the test statistics that you're going to do. Step number 2, you formulate your hypothesis. Now let's go to step number 3. The step number 3 we will do here is now we need to talk about our confidence level. So what is the level of surety? So when you come and say, I'm going to reject my null hypothesis, now we will want to know at what confidence level were you doing your study? So social science, we normally do our study at 95% confidence level. And what that means is if you're doing your study at 95% confidence level, then you have an error margin of 5%. So you have 5% chance of being wrong. Okay. So of course, that's a luxury that individuals like I think you guys are in the health sector, you don't enjoy that. So if you're in a hospital and you're trying to come up with a drug, then you cannot have 5% chance of being wrong. That is a very huge margin. You're going to kill people. So you realize maybe for the natural science guys, they are normally doing a study at around 99%. Okay. And what it means is now if you're doing a study at 99% confidence level, your error margin is 1%. So what am I going at with all this confidence level? So with confidence level, it will enable us again to get something called alpha value. Let me explain. If you're doing a study at 95% confidence level, then I've just mentioned that your error margin will be 5%. If you convert that 5% to a value, then you'll get a value of 0.05. If you're doing a study at 99% confidence level, then it means your error margin is 1%. And if you convert that percentages to a value, then you'll have a value of 0.01. So this value is what we will refer as alpha value, and we will use it during our analysis. I hope we're still together. Now, so we're in step number 3. Apart from alpha value, and I want you to have alpha value in mind, and I will explain. Uh, so in your step number 2, you formulated hypothesis, both null and alternative. Now you have to make a decision. You have to decide, are you going to reject the null hypothesis or you're going to fail to reject the null hypothesis? And how will you make this decision? You will be doing some sort of comparison. What do I mean here? You'll have to look at the alpha value, which I've already explained where you're going to get your alpha value. And maybe to clarify, I've just said that alpha value, you get it from your error margin. If your error margin is 5%, your alpha value will be 0.05. If your error margin is 1%, then your alpha value will be 0.01. Now, I've said in step number 4, these are decision-making steps. And for you to make a decision, you need to look at what is the p-value, what is the alpha value. The rule of thumb is when the p-value is less than the alpha value. I repeat, when the p-value is less than the alpha value, then that is when you reject your null hypothesis. So you just compare, you look at what is your p-value, what is your alpha value, and I've said in an event that your p-value is less than the alpha value, then that is when you reject the null hypothesis. You also understand the vice versa. So in an event that your p-value is not less than alpha value, then you will stick by the status quo, because now it will basically mean you have not met the threshold of now coming up with something new. So remember, when you reject your null hypothesis, it basically means you have rejected what is currently there, and now you want to front something new. Yes, Dalmas.
Thank you so much. I've understood on how to get the alpha value and how to use it to determine how we'll treat the null hypothesis. But for the p value is where maybe I got lost because there was a point where you were not, I was not getting you from my end. So just how do we determine the p value?
Perfect. So where do we get p-value? So in school, we went through a lot of trouble calculating, but now the beauty of softwares, uh, we will be able to get our p-value from our analysis. So like, for instance, in a few minutes, I'll be running, let's say, for instance, chi-square test of association. And now the software will provide for us that p-value. And then our job is just to compare now that p-value with our alpha. But now in school, if you are really serious, or I don't know where you went to school, but you must have done these things manually. I think you remember we had those F distribution table. You look at what is the degrees of freedom. So we went through a lot of these things in campus. But again, as long as you are given your grade, nobody cares if you can be able to calculate that thing, because you cannot compete with them with a computer. I think that's why you need to understand these softwares, because now these softwares will give you that p value. If you were to do it yourself, maybe it will have taken you maybe 20 minutes just to calculate probability value. But now here we'll just say, run for us chi-square test. And then in that chi-square test, we will see that is our p-value. And then I'll say, okay, do we also know our alpha value? We will also know where to get our alpha value. And then now we compare. And I've said the rule of thumb will be when p is less than alpha, we reject. Okay, so I know maybe some professors tend to teach this concept differently, but I believe we are speaking about the same thing. And also, I would encourage you guys to use uh, ChatGPT or Gemini, because I know we also need to embrace artificial intelligence, because that's where the world is going. So some of us, when we were learning these things, we had to cram all these things in our head, but you don't necessarily need to do that. So even some of the things that I'm talking about here, you can go and ask Gemini, what does it mean about alpha value? Ask GPT, what does it mean about p value? What is the importance? Those are some of the things you now do at your own free time. You challenge yourself by going further, and even challenge what I'm telling you. Don't trust me so much, because you need also to cross check whatever George is telling you in class. Does it really reflect what is out there? So I was explaining, I think that is step number 4, whereby I say step number 4, that is decision making step. You want to decide, are we rejecting or we are failing to reject? The last step now is now the point whereby you're now arriving to a conclusion. If today you decide that now you're rejecting the null hypothesis, which we said here is there's no relationship between employment category and gender, then I'm sure you have arrived now to your conclusion, whereby now you can say, subject to my analysis and the findings of my data, I can therefore reject the null hypothesis, Why are you rejecting? Maybe your p-value was less than alpha. Okay, what are you concluding? Now you'll conclude that there is a relationship between employment and gender. So those are the 5 steps that you need to follow in conducting any inferential analysis. In summary, I said step number 1, you need to identify your test statistics. Step number 2, you need to formulate your hypothesis. Step number 3, you need to talk about your confidence level. Step number 4, decision-making step. Step number 5, conclusion. And as a researcher, I don't encourage just to leave your work at conclusion level. No, at least go further and tell me, what do you recommend? I think that's now the utility part of your research. Okay, because now remember in chapter 1, I said there are some people who are supposed to benefit out of your work. So if you just do your study and then you're leaving it at conclusion, how useful are you? So as a scholar, now you can come and say, I've concluded that there is maybe a relationship between gender and employment category, and therefore this is my recommendation. And even further, we don't even leave it at just recommendation. I think at academic level, we always go and say, can you also, there's that part, the last part we talk about is recommendation for further studies. You also bear in mind and say, oh, if somebody else comes and read my work, and maybe I've not exhausted everything to do with the topic, which area do I recommend that somebody else can go and maybe study further? So I think the last thing should be recommendation for further studies. So, and like I said, I'm not here to teach research. I'm here to teach you guys how to do data analysis. So let's do some data analysis so that we see if you are to focus on that objective based on this descriptive data here. How are we supposed to go about it? The objective is we are investigating the relationship between employment category and gender. So one, we said what the journey should start by you identifying the structure of your variable. What is employment category? What is the structure of employment category? So if you look here, this is a categorical data. We have category clerks, custodian, and managers. Also on gender, we have category male or category female. So you are trying to check relationship between categorical variable. What do you call it? So I mean the first step whereby we say we are trying to identify the test statistics. So if you're checking relationship between 2 or more categorical variable, then the test statistics that you will do there, you will perform what we call chi-square test of association. And that is the spelling of chi-square. Like I said, after the session, go and do your own research, figure out, and I'm sure you can have Gemini or even GPT. Now ask Gemini what is chi-square test of association, for instance, and when do you use or when do you apply chi-square test of association? That is now you being a proactive student. Okay, so in this case, because gender is a categorical variable and employment category is also a categorical variable, so the test statistics that you will do there is chi-square test of association. How do you do chi-square? If you go to your software, so of course you can go to analyze, and then descriptive statistics, analyze descriptive statistics. There's an option of crosstabs or cross tabulation. So I mentioned earlier on that cross tabulation is just a contingency table. And in simple terms, you're just saying I'm going to have some certain items on the column and also some certain items on the row. Okay, and it doesn't matter which one goes where. So if I click on cross tab, then I have rows and columns. So like I said, there's no specific criteria that will tell you which variable will go to the row section and which one will go to the column. So I'll take gender, I'll have it on the row section, and then I will take employment category, I will have it on the column section. Now, if I go to the option of exact, so there's a lot of tests. So I don't want to talk about Monte Carlo simulation uh, unless I was having a different audience. So if there was somebody who's really deep into statistics, I think that is when I would have gone into things like Monte Carlo simulation or now exact test, or are we doing asymptotic only? So of course, I'll leave this conversation at asymptotic significance. And again, this one should not worry you because we're from different levels. So if you have not maybe done a lot of statistics, it doesn't matter. Okay, so make sure you will be having asymptotic only as the option under exact test. And then if you go to statistics, then you will select chi-square because that is now the test that you're doing. Why chi-square? So of course, I know this one will come somewhere, maybe even in your assignment. So right now we are actually working under the assumption that so if there's parametric test, then we also have what we call non-parametric test. And non-parametric tests are now those tests that you do with datasets that are not normal. It's not bell-shaped curve. Okay, that's why if maybe my audience was purely about individuals who are statistician, then we would say let's test for normality. And then if our data is not normal, we have two things. Either now we decide to do those tests that are under non-parametric, or we now see how do we convert a data set that is not normal to now normal. And I think that is a conversation that is a bit advanced. But if you're interested in that conversation, again, I'm here. So I think if you take in our brochure, there's that class. It's called Advanced Research Methodology class. I think that's one of the classes that I teach. But now, who comes in that class? At least somebody who has interacted with research work before, especially maybe those who are doing their master's or their PhD level. So here, I will make sure I select chi-square because chi-square is now one of the parametric tests. And I've said we're doing parametric because we're working under the assumption that our data is normal. So once I've selected chi-square, I'll click continue. I think that's enough. So let's just click OK. And there you go. I have my results output. The first table on case processing summary, there's nothing much there. As you can see, it's all about the sample population. So we are handling around 474 participants. The second table you're seeing there is on now the cross tabulation between employment category and gender. And I think this is the same table that we also were able to achieve using the pivot table. So as you can see, we're having now the 74 male managers and only 10. So where is our p-value in this table? So if you follow the Pearson chi-square all the way to the end, you are seeing a figure of 0.000, asymptotic significance to p-value with our alpha value. We're doing our study at 95% confidence level, which means what? Our error margin stands at 5%. If our error margin is 5%, then that means our alpha value will be 0.05. Let's do a comparison. So 0.000 is less than 0.05. So what do we do there? We say that the rule of thumb is when the p-value is less than alpha, then that's when you reject your null hypothesis. So in this case, we will reject the null hypothesis that say there is no relationship between gender and employment category. So we're going to reject that. And we will now go for the alternative. And the alternative says there is a relationship between gender and employment category. So that is our finding. That's the insight that we have established. So what will be our conclusion? We will therefore conclude that among the factors that contribute to someone assuming a certain employment category, gender is actually one of them. Again, I said our job is not just to conclude, what are we recommending? So now that we have seen we are having a relation between gender and employment category, so as a researcher, I might maybe recommend things like affirmative action, about say, can you maybe create positions that are maybe dedicated for female? That's one route that you can go. And I'm sure this is not a new thing. I believe in our parliament, we have a position called women rep. And I think this is the same idea, whereby maybe uh, women were not able to compete with their counterparts male in political seats. And that's why they said, hey, can we create maybe a position that is dedicated for the female? And no matter how charismatic I am as George, I might not be able to vie for a women rep position. So that is one of the affirmative action. And we have also seen this even in education, whereby I think at some point there was that time whereby the male counterparts were having a different grade to join university compared to female in as far as the public universities were concerned. I don't know if that is still the case, but I'm sure uh, you can relate with that. So that is an affirmative action, which can be one of the recommendation. Uh, I think I'll leave it at there so that if you have other recommendation, then you can also educate me, or maybe I'm sure you're getting the point. I'm just saying, don't just leave your research at conclusion, but also go further and say what you're recommending. Allow me to stop there. And I think, like I said, I was not intending to have a class today, but at least I'm sure you have learned something. So we'll pick it up with our session tomorrow, and then we see what we'll be able to achieve. So thank you all for your time. And unless there's a question or concern, I wish you a good night and we'll meet tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.